Welcome everyone to today's session of our Back to School Boot Camp. Today we will be hearing from Teresa Parrish, who is a loss control consultant and sensory processing expert here at RAS. Teresa is going to talk with us about sensory processing and how it impacts behavior, specifically as we see that and how our brains impact us and some of those classroom behaviors and challenges that we might see as we go into another new school year. Before we get started with Teresa, I wanted to let you know that you can enter any questions that you might have in the Q&A function, and we will address those if we have time at the end. And if not, we'll make sure that Teresa gets those questions and she can get an answer to you as well. So let's go ahead and get started with Teresa.
Welcome to the presentation today on sensory processing and behavior, a brain-first approach to classroom challenges. I'm so glad you're with us. I'm going to first start with one of my very favorite quotes. Do the best you can until you know better, and then when you know better, do better. Maya Angelou said this, and I really feel like it rings true. Because we all can't do any better than we do right now, today, because we only know what we know right now. And so when we do learn something, then what we need to do is put it into practice. So I'm hoping today that you guys all gain some nuggets that you can take back with you to your classrooms and really help the students who you are with every single day. So this is the overview of what we're going to talk about. Our challenging behaviors on the rise, the brain-based why behind behaviors. We're going to talk about prevention, and we're going to talk about strategies for safety. So this is the question of our behaviors on the rise. Well, in the spring of 2025, Your Therapy Source conducted a national survey to better understand the current trends in United States schools from the perspective of school-based PTs, OTs, speech and language pathologists, and teachers. So a total of 1,027 professionals responded to the survey, and it really offers data showing where students are struggling the most, why service referrals are up, and what challenges the schools actually must face and what changes they can consider to make things better for the students to support all of their success. So if you look at the question that says, compared to the fall of 2019, students in my classroom, school, or district have been misbehaving. The first data up here, that says more. So you can see, by far, most respondents feel that behaviors have gotten worse. As far as the RAS trends, all of our districts, we show that since 2018, there was a little bit of a blip in 2019, and then of course 2020 happened, and everyone knows that a lot of school districts were actually closed. And so I believe that that had a lot to do with that data. But then you can see from 2019 to 2021, 2022, 2023, and 2024, they all have been slowly increasing. And if you look at 2025, you might think, oh, things are getting better in 2025. But when this presentation is being recorded, 2025 school year hasn't started yet. And so usually 7/1 is the beginning of a school year, and so as of right now, we're still in July when this is being recorded. So not a lot of injuries have happened at this point in time. We still have a whole school year to go. So that is the R data. It does show that behaviors are on the rise. And the other thing that I can attest to is that I get a lot of people reaching out to me asking for resources and assistance with challenging behaviors to help prevent injuries in their districts And I feel like that has gotten more and more and more people have been reaching out, saying the same thing about their district. So how about for you? Do you feel like you would answer the survey questions the same, that students are misbehaving more in your district, or about the same or less? So going on from the data, we're going to talk a little bit about what behavior is. So from a neuroscience-informed perspective, behaviors actually are the result of the activation of the stress response system. So it really is not always intentional, and I feel like that is one of the things that a lot of people need to remember when they're looking at student behavior. We feel oftentimes that it is intentional, geared toward us, they're just trying to get a rise from us, but oftentimes those behaviors are a response to something that's going on in their system, in their body. And so we need to actually start looking at the child from a neuro lens and what's going on in their brain and their body. So it really depends on how the brain develops, how it responds to threats, and how it's influenced by trauma, and also neurodivergence. So all of those things play a huge impact on the student and how they behave throughout the day. Understanding the deeper why is very, very important. We really need to look beyond what we see and dig deeper to find out really what's going on. And sometimes that's as easy as just asking the student, you know, hey, I see that you're kind of struggling with what's going on. Can you tell me more about that? Or what's going on with that? And then just be quiet. Also, it's easier for a lot of kids and adults actually to have a kind of a reflective conversation when you're side by side versus looking straight on at each other. So if you can have a little walk with a student down the hallway or outside, being next to somebody is actually a better way to converse on especially subjects such as what's going on, because they may need to really reflect and think about that. And if you're doing an activity like walking or standing next to them as you're maybe washing windows or wiping off the board or something like that, that can be very helpful for that student. And it really helps to kind of co-regulate with that student. So we'll be talking a little bit more about that as the time goes on. But really finding the deep why is really important. So I also like to share a really cool hand model of the brain by Dr. Dan Siegel. And it really shows how the brain is impacted by behavior. And if you are interested in this topic, we're sharing a link, but you can also just go onto YouTube and search hand model of the brain by Dr. Dan Siegel, S-I-E-G-E-L, and you can find all sorts of videos, and some of them are actually really great to even share with your students. So moving on, the next question I get is really, once I know about the brain a little bit, now what do I do about this? I really stressed earlier that finding the why is really important. To understand what's causing that behavior is going to really be able to help you understand the student better and help the student better, instead of just trying to change the behavior. Because we can't really change that behavior until we know why it's occurring. So you're going to start looking for stressors in the environment, because oftentimes students or people are having issues with what's going on in that environment. So what kinds of things are you hearing? Are you experiencing with your vision? What kind of things could impact that individual's felt safety? So look at that, because that felt safety is individualized. So you might feel your classroom is pretty safe, but for a student that has had trauma in their background, or they're defensive to touch and the student next to them keeps touching them, all of that can play a huge impact on that student's felt safety in the classroom. Also look at developing skills. Are they really having difficulty with some part of either a lesson or what's going on in the classroom, what's being expected of them? Because they might not have the skills yet to be able to complete what's being asked for. Also look at triggers. Are there triggers that always impact that student? So if every time the student goes to math class, they try and elope, that would be a trigger. So asking the student, hey, I see that every time we go to math class, you are having difficulty staying in the classroom. You know, what's up with that? Can we help you with that? Is there something we can do? And just listen. Really stop and just listen. The other thing that I want to really focus in on is just checking yourself. A lot of times when behaviors start occurring, it actually impacts us. It makes us feel more dysregulated. And the students in the classroom will all pick up on what you are feeling. So if you're feeling stressed or dysregulated yourself, the other students in the classroom are going to feel that. So not only do you feel it, your other students feel it, and the student that's actually dysregulated to begin with, we're all kind of joining in on that dysregulation. So check yourself. If you need to, even say something like, oh, I'm just really having a tough day today, and I just really need to listen to my body. So we're all just gonna take a nice deep breath. So I'm gonna take a deep breath, and if you need to take a deep breath too, then let's all just take a deep breath. So, and you can even show them something like, when I'm stressed, I box breathe, and you can draw a picture of a square or a rectangle, and you can show them how they can do that too when they're feeling stressed. You breathe in on one side of the square and then hold it for 4 seconds going up. Breathe out, going across, and hold it going down. And then you just start all over again. So that's a really good way to help not only you get back on track, but also help your whole classroom. So if you're interested in looking deeper into the whys and really digging and finding out what's going on, Connie Persick says behaviors are signal to the deeper whys, and she's got a great program out there that really helps to find the whys. It's called the Why Toolkit, and you can find her through supportablesolutions.com. So the next quote that I really want to share with you is by Dr. Wayne Dyer, and he said, if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at will change. So I also like to think about the fact that when I look at a student differently, then the student will actually change, and how I perceive them, and actually sometimes how other people perceive them will also change. So how to actually figure this out and really dig deeper into the why, and to start looking at students differently, we need to understand all the different perspectives of the why of behavior. So with this pictogram, which actually can be found on Greg Santucci's website, you can look at the old way of thinking, where we think that students are all just being defiant, they're trying to escape, they're attention seeking, or they're just trying to avoid something. So if that's our mindset on why behaviors are happening, we can probably put each student into all of those areas, but what if it's something else? What if it's something deeper than that? And really that's what we're finding. let's dig deeper than just those 4 things and really look at all of the other things that are occurring in people's lives that can cause behaviors. So from a neural or brain-based paradigm, sensory processing is one of the things that can really affect behavior. Emotional regulation, motor challenges, learning disabilities, and trauma. So we really can't always focus on using rewards and punishments to get compliance if these things are really what's going on. So if you're digging deeper, you really need to dig deep and find out what's going on so we can really help them. Focus in on what areas that student is needing help with so we can move past just thinking they're just trying to avoid something. Why are they trying to avoid it? So really looking deep. A lot of times what we're finding is regulation is the problem. So one of those things in the pit was emotional regulation. So what is regulation? If you look at Stuart Shanker's book, he actually has 5 steps to self-regulation. So first of all, you want to just reframe the behavior and recognize all the stressors that are going on, and then reflect and enhance the stress awareness, and then respond differently and reduce those stressors if you can. If you want more information on self-regulation and Stuart Shanker's book, really take a look at selfreg.com or selfreg.ca. Okay? That is a great place to start. And it's really good to teach your students too about that. Sensory processing was also one of the things on that list in the pit that we want to dig deeper on. And that's really my specialty area, is sensory processing and how it affects behavior. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. If you don't know, sensory processing is a significant aspect of normal brain function. We all deal with sensory processing. That's actually how we get all the information that comes into our brain and is delivered to our brain from our body through interoception. And it tells us what is going on in our environment and inside of us. It helps us to constantly take in all of the sensations and then figure out what to do with them. What do we not need to pay attention to? What do we really need to pay attention to? It's how we understand the world. Now, I used to always think that everybody's sensory system was like mine and actually didn't understand that I had a sensory system. But I hated cotton balls, and I couldn't figure out why we had cotton balls. They just felt gross. They, made my mouth kind of dry. They just sent shivers up my spine. I just hated the feeling of cotton balls. And I thought everybody did until I saw my mom or my dad, take the cotton out of the vitamin container. And I was like, how can you touch that? And they were like, well, it's no big deal, Teresa. And so that's when I first actually understood that what I experience in the world isn't what everybody else is experiencing. And so sometimes just that knowledge is helpful. It's really foundational in interpreting behaviors. We can look at a student and we can learn so much by how they're experiencing the sensations and the things that are going on in their environment by just watching them. It's also foundational in how we can help students. It makes a big difference in our lives if we can actually understand and then predict if something is going to be intolerable for a student and cause a behavior, and if we can help that student, they might not go into that trauma or that crisis situation if we understand that student's sensory system and what's kind of going on with that. So we do have 5 senses, plus 3 others. So most of us all know the 5 senses, and so I just zoomed past that really quick. But the ones that I want you to kind of understand are these hidden sensations, and they include proprioception, vestibular, and interoception. And so proprioception is really where we are getting input through our tendons, joints, and muscles. And it really helps us to figure out where we are in space. It helps us to reach into our pocket and pull out a quarter out of a whole bunch of change. We know by just feeling it without even looking at it. We know where our body is in space without actually having to watch our hand reach for our water bottle or something. So we don't need to do that. That's called proprioception. Vestibular sensation is any kind of head movement, any movement, and that's actually located in our inner ear, and we have a whole vestibular system that does all sorts of cool things. It's probably one of my favorite senses that we have. But one of the senses that is getting more and more traction and understanding now versus even 5-10 years ago is called interoception, and that's our inner feelings of what's going on in our body. It's what our body tells us about what's going on inside. So I have to go to the bathroom, I'm hungry, I'm scared, those types of things are all occurring inside of our bodies. And so if you want more information on that, Kelly Mahler, Mahler, is a great resource for more information on interoception, and I encourage you to check it out. So this is another pictogram that I love to use to help us understand the brain and how sensory processing is impacted with that. And it is from Dan Siegel's book, on the whole brain child, and it talks about the upstairs brain and the downstairs brain. And this also is a really good concept to kind of help to tell your students about their brain. So the upstairs brain is up here, and I want you to understand that this part of your brain is the part of the brain that is your thinking and reasoning, your problem solving, your planning brain, and it's under construction until your late 20s, early 30s. And so the students that you're working with, their brain is still under construction. So we can't expect them to be able to do all the things that we do or think about things as we think about things. The downstairs brain is that part of the brain that deals with sensory processing, things that happen without us actually having control over that. It's very reactive and it's geared to safety. So our downstairs brain says, I need to feel safe. And I don't feel safe here, and so I need to flee. So that's the part of the brain that actually does this also. If I'm not going to flee, then I need to stand up and fight. And a lot of times it bypasses that prefrontal cortex or the cortex that is the upstairs brain and just reacts without any thought process whatsoever. So for an example, a student may be defensive to touch and they're just standing there and one of their classmates bumps into them accidentally, but the student's brain that is reactive feels that touch, it hurts to them, and they strike out. Yes, it wasn't good for them to strike, but if it was their brain's reaction to that touch that was painful, then it was clearly to that individual, they just did it. They didn't think. It bypassed the thinking stage of their brain. And so that can cause some really big emotions. So when a child has big emotions, or if they feel threatened, or there's a perception of threat, they're going to be dysregulated. If they're dysregulated, they're downstairs. They're in their downstairs brain, and something might be blocking the stairs, so they can't get upstairs. So they can't access that down upstairs brain. And that's where thinking and reasoning and looking into the future occurs, and they can't go there. So if we as adults can use our upstairs brain and help them and help understand that they're in their downstairs brain, so we need to do things to help them get upstairs by co-regulating with them, that's what we need to do. We need to use the power of us, the power of you, and they need you to co-regulate, not escalate with them. We don't need you to join them in that escalation, where oftentimes that's where our bodies will go. So we might have to step back, take a moment and breathe, take a moment and just separate, understanding that this might be a reaction of the brain, not something that's intentional. That can be very helpful in you actually gaining trust from that student and helping them feel more of that felt safety in your classroom. So you can't reason with anybody that can't access their upstairs brain. So reasoning is just run out the window. At this point, your de-escalation techniques that you learn is out the window. So you need to just listen to them, try not to speak very much, if at all, validate them if you can, by even just being with them, and help them feel safe. So meet them where they are, because they're downstairs. Really kind of help understand that this is really, at this point in time, the best thing for you to do. Don't escalate them further. Plus, we also need to remember that a child's sensory system isn't fully developed until they might be 9 to 12 years old, before that's fully developed. So all students younger than that are probably going to have some sort of issues with sensory processing. So where do we all begin? Well, I want you to create an environment of safety. Really connect with your students. Really kind of figure them out. Really look at them through a different lens. Try and figure out what you can do to really connect with them on their level. Use co-regulation, and by using co-regulation, regulate yourself first. And that sometimes can be really, really hard. If when you step in your classroom and it's just chaos, that can actually increase your dysregulation just like that. So we might need to just step back and just take some deep breaths and do some things that help your system to regulate. Teach students about their brain. That's really, really important, because then you can actually model that in your teaching methods and help them understand even more all throughout the school year about their brains, their bodies, and it's really going to help with the epidemic of anxiety that's going on. I don't know if you've read or heard of the book, The Anxious Generation, but that book really shows a lot of research about how the students now and children are living totally different lives and are more anxious than any other generation before, because of the screen, the technology with smartphones, social media, and really not being in the whole play arena like we used to. They don't get as much recess, they don't get as much outside kind of free play time. They don't have as much freedom that we had, or that I had at least when I was growing up. So they're a lot more inside and not exploring as much. And so all of those things impact our ability to really come out of the anxious or anxiety world. So he gives several great plans of what we can do to really help students. And one of them is teaching them about the brain and teaching them about regulation. So regulation tips, predictability. If you can, especially in the first couple weeks to a month of the school year, really help them understand the schedule and help them know that, okay, I understand that this is scary for a lot of you. We have a new school, a new room, new kids, new teacher, all of those things are new and different. And so we're just going to take it day by day. And this is what our schedule looks like. And having that predictability can really help the brain to not be on such a heightened fear place, okay? So the other thing that we can do is use repetitive and rhythmic activities all throughout the day in predictive breaks. So if before each lesson you start out with 3 minutes of deep breathing, so maybe box breathing, or you could do kind of a figure 8 breathing, where you're breathing in and out and in and out. You could do it like that. You could also use the figure 8 in other ways, kind of more of as a movement thing. You could actually have them, hold something in their hand and go behind their head in that figure 8, and then down back behind their knees, and then kind of come up, switch hands, go behind their head, go down in around their knees, kind of do something like that. That's also really helpful because you're bending, you're getting that head movement. So there's a lot of different things that you're doing right there. But any kind of rhythmic motions, some places get just dowels from Home Depot, have them cut up in a certain amount and use it as rhythm sticks. That's really helpful. If you do have kids in the classroom that like to hit other kids, that's not so great. So everybody do what you do, make sure that everyone's safe. Some places actually even use pencils, or you can actually do some rhythm on the desktop as well. So those repetitive rhythmic activities are very, very good to regulate not only your students, but also yourself. So what I often recommend is having like some sort of sensory or movement break that is kind of all put in strategic times throughout the day. And what is it? It's an activity that helps provide input to improve performance of the nervous system, so of the brain, of the central nervous system, and that really helps people to get more into that prefrontal cortex, into that cortex, that upstairs brain, so they can learn, they can grow, they can actually remember what they learned the day before and the day before that. It's a way to affect those brain-driven behaviors through adapting to their coping behaviors. And so this is something that you can watch for. So if you have some kids that are seeking certain behaviors, you can kind of pick up on that. If they are rocking, that's trying to activate their vestibular system. And so what that tells you is that they actually need more vestibular input. So what can you do to give them more vestibular input? Well, you can actually sit them on maybe a beach ball with just a half a puff of air or so in it. This is a pretty easy and cost-effective way for your whole classroom to just have access to movement when they're sitting. Because when you sit on this, even if there's a little bit of air in here, you can actually do some wiggling, and you don't have to get a therapy ball out. They're not going to fall off of that therapy ball. They're not going to fall off of this. This is just on their seat. And that creates a little bit of vestibular movement, which can be very good for any of your kiddos. They don't need to have, like a therapy plan that says they can use it. I believe if the whole classroom has that as a tool, that the whole classroom can use those tools. So check into that with your district, your school, and kind of see about that. This is another thing, it's called Zen Sit. It's kind of the same type of thing where you just put some air in it. This is a little bit more costly than getting a bunch of beach balls. They also have things called Sito discs. Those are also pretty readily available, but they also have a higher price point than your typical beach ball. So those are just some ideas. So we want to look at what are they seeking and what do they need more of, and then try and give them, or teach them even, to get what they need out of maybe that sensory chest or that toolbox in your classroom to help them with those feelings that they're having. What are they trying to seek? What are they avoiding? It really is a way to prevent behaviors before they need to be de-escalated. So if you give the sensory system or the nervous system what it needs beforehand, their stress chemicals are going to come down if their system feels calm and safe. Then the calming chemicals are up here. So those neurochemicals such as dopamine and serotonin are up here. Then the stress chemicals are going to be down here. They can never be the same. One's usually higher than the other. But if we can do things all throughout the day to help keep those calming chemicals up, that's going to lessen the chance of those stress chemicals being so high that the nervous system crashes and has an explosive behavior of some kind, okay? So, why do students need it? To help them with regulation. They all need to regulate. We all need to feel regulated so we can learn. So we can focus and deal with stressors better. So, being regulated just means that whether the stressor is positive or negative, that we can actually deal with that. We can help with that. It's understanding really what your internal state is, and so really talking about that. So even as you modeling that, you can say, "Oh boy, I just had a morning, and my stomach is feeling all in knots today because of something I need to do this afternoon." So I think what I need to do is really just go take a walk outside during my lunch break. And so you can give them those little tips and show them how you are handling the stressors in your life, and that can be helpful for them. The brain and the body are actually in harmony, what's going on, when kids and you are regulated. And it doesn't necessarily mean calm. It might just mean that your system matches with what's going on in the area or in the environment at the time. So it doesn't always mean calm. So just so you know that. If you want to know more, Stuart Shanker's book, it's called Self-Reg, is really fabulous. He also has some YouTube and podcasts out there that are fantastic and will help with your journey in helping with self-regulation as well. So, Greg Santucci said, "It's rare that we regulate ourselves. We often use others to help us get regulated." So that co-regulation is really, really important. And so not only you regulating with the other students, but other students are co-regulating as well. And so just really help to understand what that really means. So what we want is more of pre-planned or versus reactive breaks. We don't really want reactive breaks. Oftentimes with that, I see people taking a child out of the classroom, and we really want to have just those pre-planned breaks, or to actually even teach the student beforehand, really talk with them and find out what things help calm their body. So we have a plan of some self-soothing or some soothing activities beforehand, and really help that student recognize when they are starting to get dysregulated, so they can take action right away, and so it doesn't turn into an escalated situation. So pre-planned is very important. Having that solutions plan and talking about that when they are happy and when they are regulated, not right after an incident, because they're probably their brain is like offline at that time. So you really need to let them really come down from that. You can use it at any time. If you notice some things, you can maybe bring something over to them to help them. Or if they notice a sign of dysregulation, they actually maybe can ask you for permission to get something out of maybe a place, or go sit in a corner, a calming corner or something like that. And it should be used throughout the day, and you never want to force a tool or the use of a strategy on a student, or only use it during escalation, because then the brain actually will, kind of put those two and two together, and that can be a learned behavior, that if I do this, then I get this, okay? So what I look at is power sensations. So there are 3 power sensations in the sensory system, and one of them is a vestibular input. The other one is movement, which is very important, and then the deep pressure touch. So that movement is going to give that proprioception, and we're also going to get that vestibular movement through movement as well. And so these are the 3 power sensations. So we want to use them as much as possible when we're trying to help the student either get regulated or to get de-escalated before there's a crisis. So these are some ideas. You can begin class, like I said before, with deep breathing or stretching activities. Anytime you're doing anything where where you're bending over, such as like a downward dog position or something like that, that is going to activate the vestibular system because you're inverting, so you're going kind of more upside down. That infinity loop tracing, so if you just trace an imaginary infinity loop in front of you and have everyone copy you, you can do it with your right hand first and go one direction, and then stop, and then go the other direction. So everybody in the room, you can all stand up and try this. It's actually kind of fun, and you're probably getting tired of listening to my voice right now, so it's going to be really nice to help regulate your system. So do that with your right hand. Now we're going to try it with our left hand. So the same thing goes. You're going to go up and down and around. So that infinity loop tracing is really good. Okay? So now stop and go the other direction. All right. You can also get a metronome. You can get that off of YouTube. You can get like a metronome app on your phone and set that metronome to 60 beats per minute. And then have the whole class clap to that metronome, okay? And then you can actually not only clap, but you can stomp or march. So there's things that you can do that are pretty simple to do that will really help to regulate your whole classroom and get everybody regulated. You could do jumping jacks. That's pretty regulating, right? Some kids have trouble with jumping jacks, so sometimes that excludes some kids or makes, points out, that that's maybe a skill that they haven't actually achieved. So really be aware of that. The other thing you could do is called a windmill exercise. So basically you're going to start out like a V, and then you're going to bend over and touch your opposite foot, and you're going to do the same thing to the other side. So that's called a windmill, okay? So you could do something like that. You can look at starting Balavix. I don't know actually how to say it, but it is a really cool program that you can teach the kids, and it uses balls, and it has rhythmic motions and coordination, and it is super cool. So I put a link there, but if you actually just type it into YouTube, you'll see all sorts of interesting videos that you can kind of see what that's all about. So that's a really good program that a lot of school districts have actually started implementing. So how and when is the next thing? We have these alerting breaks, and we have calming breaks. So if you need an alerting break, It's usually after long periods of sitting. I don't actually encourage long periods of sitting. I encourage that if kids can get up and move, it's best. You're gonna learn better when you're up and moving. It's to help wake up the brain, and it offers students who are seeking more movement, it offers them the movement that they need. It actually, what we want you to do is use more vestibular input, and then after that vestibular input, we want you to ground them with proprioception. So usually, what happens after an alerting break, some kids will get over alert, and that causes problems too. So help ground them by giving some proprioception. If you're ever in doubt about what you should do, give them proprioception. So there's a couple of COTAs that have some great YouTube videos out there, and they always say, when in doubt, prop it out. So there you go. Any kind of joint input, so stomping, jumping, doing clapping games, all of that kind of stuff can help with proprioception. So when in doubt, prop it out. Calming breaks after any transition. So if you're going from one classroom to another, that's a great time to put in a calming break. If they need to be calmed, there you go. That's pretty easy. Give them a calming break. If they need to be regulated, if you want to have some decrease in kind of that over, after research, when the kids are all hyped up, that can be a really good time to help them. If they have some challenging issues, like if math is really challenging, for some students, doing it before and after that class can actually help as well. All of those calming breaks, you do want to use not vestibular, but just proprioception, okay? So what if behaviors do happen? I want you first to check yourself. The power of the pause, just 15 to 30 seconds of you just figuring out how you're feeling, looking inwards, and making sure that that pause is long enough for you to be in your upstairs brain when you are dealing with that behavior is very important. If you can't, you need to tap out, and if there's somebody else in the room that can help, you need to do that. Now, some schools I work with, they actually have kind of a floating person that will walk around, and if they have a teacher that needs kind of a timeout for themselves, they alert them somehow, and that person comes into the classroom and works with that student while the teacher works with the rest of the group. Okay? They don't take them out of the classroom, but they'll sit with them and be with them. We actually have the upper hand, and so because we have a fully developed cortex, and so we need to take charge and understand that we need to really regulate ourselves, keep our voices low, be really calm in the moment, even if it doesn't seem like we should be. Don't take things personally. A lot of times it's not directed at you because it's just an instinct of their brain. Their fight or flight system is offline. They are downstairs. Sometimes we forget about that because our sensory system just goes right to that fight or flight. Maybe because of something in our past. And so we need to recognize that sometimes we're not going to be perfect, and we need to give ourselves grace and give each other grace. And so that's something too. You do want to maybe afterwards repair that relationship with that student. Maybe sit down and just say, I kind of lost it yesterday. And I just wanted to apologize. They then will understand that, everybody's human, and it'll help repair that. So co-regulation, I've said it before, I'm going to say it again, is key. I love this rendition of from the Diversity Kids about what co-regulation is. If you look in this picture, it is a picture of their storm and our calm, and when they meet, we need it to be like this. Co-regulation occurs. We don't want you to join their storm. We want to co-regulate and have them join our calm. So this is just a slide of some of my very favorite just reminders, I guess. Greg Santucci says, as humans, we are wired for human connection. And connection is what a lot of students need. They're not getting the connection they need because of all the screens that are out there. You know, there's just not that connection that we used to have. The brain doesn't like surprises. If you have predictable routines and communicate when a routine changes, that's going to help with regulation. Felt safety is key. They have to feel safe or you're going to have behaviors. Patterned, repetitive, rhythmic activities help with registration. It's amazing. Try it. I dare ya. Try it and try it regularly and you'll notice a huge difference. Fight or flight behaviors stem from the activation of the sympathetic nervous system. They are a child's adaptive responses to stress. And that's by Dr. Mona Delahooke. And Dr. Nick Long says, be the thermostat, not the thermometer. Very good advice. Now, just quickly, Beyond Behaviors is written by Dr. Mona Delahooke. If you want to teach your kids about the brain and the nervous system, they have this really cool book. It's a chart, a flip chart that actually kind of has great pictures on one side, and on the other side it tells you what to say. So great resource. Mona Delahooke is a great resource for a lot of different things on behaviors. Lori Desautel has written a lot of books and actually even has a program for educators. She's actually in the classroom working with students, and so that's a really good program. I also have several schools that have done book studies together on this book. It's called What Happened to You. It's written by Dr. Bruce Perry and Oprah Winfrey. It's awesome on audio because it's a conversation between Dr. Perry and Oprah. Super, super cool. It really goes into trauma and how that affects behavior. This is also a really good book. It's called 15-Minute Focus. It's called Regulation and Co-Regulation. They give you all sorts of really cool tips and strategies to bring calm into your classroom. It's really thin. This is also a great book study for you guys out there. Okay, next. Coming up on the end. We're going to review some key points. I want you to connect with your students. Number one, focus on regulation and why the behaviors might be occurring. Check out some of those resources if you want to dig deeper. Use the power of the pause. That's hard to begin to use, but if you start using it right away, it can be helpful. When you're dysregulated, the auditory system is online, so understand that you talking to them, and especially talking in a higher tone of voice or a more of an angry voice, they're going to actually go deeper into the downstairs, so be really aware of that. Practice overriding the instinct to respond in kind. Our brains are actually kind of programmed to respond in kind. So if somebody says hello, you usually say hello. If somebody says hi, you say hi. If somebody's really angry and are all, kind of wired up, a lot of times that kind of gets into your skin too. So be really aware of practicing to override that instinct to do that. And then keep learning and keep growing. Read some things. Look at some ideas on what you can do. I have a few things up here to kind of show you that you can use in the classroom as your sensory techniques. Weighted items like this are really good to put on the lap. If they're long or wide enough, you can use them around the neck things like that. You can use some theraptubing. If this is expensive, guess what? Go to your local bike shop and ask them for the innards of the tire. A lot of times they just will give them to you for free. So those are really fun. You can play lots of games with those. For those paraprofessionals or even teachers, if you need some strategies and stuff, we've got all these like little cards that you can put on a D-ring or an O-ring, and you can actually use some of these strategies in your classroom. So we'll link to that. If you have students that don't understand the concept of time yet, or if they're in the fight or flight and they're in their downstairs brain, they're not going to understand time, you can just set a timer. So I recommend these very highly. There's other weighted items available for deep pressure touch. This is like a little, looks like a butterfly, and that goes around the neck like this, or it can sit on the lap, okay? Another thing you can do to help with joint input is put like a handprint on the wall and have kids press into that, okay? And then the last thing is there's a weighted vest that can be used as well. So I have all sorts of different tips and tricks. You can actually ask your OTs in your districts for some ideas on what you can put in your sensory bin or your tool chest of sorts. One of my favorite things is called I call it a hug buddy, but you can also call it a chair buddy. It is a sweatshirt that has two sections of poly pellets in it, and you just put that sweatshirt or long sleeve t-shirt over a chair, and then you can have that on all of your chairs in the classroom, and if a student wants to use it, they can. If they don't want to use it, they don't need to. But you can see how that you can just, give yourself a hug with that. You can just have them set on your lap. They can actually kind of fidget with it. But that weighted feeling helps to increase serotonin and help people feel more calm and regulated. So that's another tip or trick for you. So thanks so much for being a part of this. If you have questions, please reach out, and we look forward to hearing about how you've taken some tidbits from this presentation and put them into your day. Thank you again.
So we have just a couple of the resources and links that Teresa shared in her presentation today. If you want to take a quick screenshot or snap of any of these resources, we will share these as well once the presentation is recorded and sent out. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to submit those, and we'll send them to Teresa as well. As we're finishing up, just a quick thank you to all of you for everything that you do in your schools each and every day as we enter a new school year here. You will also receive a very brief survey as soon as we finish the webinar, just a couple of questions to better understand what kind of information is helpful to you and what you'd like to see in any future events. Thank you once again for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.